No. All right, here's the recording. So welcome to this webinar. It's actually the fourth webinar of this series. So many of you have just joined. So welcome, even though it's the fourth one, I will just show you a little bit what we were talking about on the first three. I am asking you to join, please, something called Nearpod. It was in the invitation of Google Calendar that I sent you. If you haven't seen it, let me show you the screen. Okay, so when you go to Nearpod, you will see in the interactive presentation. Yes, this is the class code. You join as a student, you can put the class code, you can use the first or the second link. I will keep sending it through the conversation because every time somebody connects, they don't see the previous screen. Yes, but I will do it. And once you join, you will be in the student view. Okay, and in the student view, we have different things you can see. The first one is my presentation, my CV, basically the general information. Yes, I am a university professor, coordinator, and teacher trainer. These are some things that I have done, studied, and worked on. Well, my teaching experience ranges from children when I could teach one, like all of the levels in one school, and currently I'm teaching at the university. Also, I have trained teachers for more than 1 year by now. So that is the one of the things that I'm passionate about, and actually the idea of sharing this information came from basically the advantage of doing webinars, because anybody from any place can get connected, and since we record it, you can also have access to it later. As difficult as online education is, it also has several advantages. Yes, and in this case, if you are in a different place, if you're not in Quetzaltenango, or for example, I don't travel to the place where you are at. For example, last year I had a chance to participate in 2 teacher training sessions from the embassy, yes, and TTS, and I went to one in Huehuetenango and one in Solula. Yes, but I didn't participate in the one in Quetzaltenango. But right now, as we are doing these things online, then we can all get connected, okay? So let's try one more time. Whoever is here and you haven't seen this information in chat, we'll double it again. We'll send it to you. Try to get connected through these links to Nearpod. The last 5 letters are the letters of the class code. If at some point you will be asked. I said in the email previously in the one of the Google Calendar that if you are using a cell phone or a tablet, you may need to download Nearpod. If this is not comfortable for you, you can keep watching my screen. My screen will be changing from teacher view to student view because the student view is interactive. As you can see right now, whoever is in Nearpod, you can interact with my CV. Yes, scroll down, scroll up, make it bigger, make it smaller. Yes, but you can see this information. Okay. Now, the next thing that I can present to you, yes, and show you, this is what we have been talking about so far in the previous webinars. So the first one, yes, is the table that, yes, 10 people are connected in the, excellent, in Nearpod. If not, let me show you also from here. Okay. So this is the information about CFR, Common European Framework for Languages. We discussed where it came from, why it's good to know what's happening in this framework, yes, what is the meaning of the levels, and in this specific document, we discussed how students build up, yes, from level A1 to level C1 information in language functions. in grammar, in discourse markers and vocabulary, and in topics, yes. And I left some resources where people could investigate a little bit more. We also said that a common European framework helps us to have, just like the name of it, a framework, a reference point, yes, for level of students, for how to evaluate the skills, how to evaluate material that we're going to use for teaching, for example, yes, and how to work effectively on the different activities that we have on a certain level, yes? Okay, so the next thing that we discussed, again, this is the next document that we had. We discussed English proficiency exams for different purposes, yes? In that case, the different purposes included professional English, yes, or included, for example, well, something that you need for university or something that you need for professional development, yes, because that's quite important. So this is the big table of all of the exams and all of the information, yes, of their purpose, what kind of exam it is, if it's digital or paper, what kind of setting you can take it in, yes, what kind of sections you will find, how much is the price, if it's related or not with common European framework, if you can interpret your scores based on numbers or letters or how, and some additional information in this case, yes. The next thing we discussed, here you will get probably a link opened. Yes, we talked about different options for teacher training. And one of the teacher training options was an international certificate, which is a TESOL or TEFL certificate, where you can study online and you can get accredited by an international establishment. Yes, this is another one that I showed you. So there are different options. Some that you can take only classroom and online ones. Yes, we discussed the difference in prices, the how many hours, what kind of information you may get uh, during those sessions. Yes, and one of the other recommendations that I gave is that we cannot was that not necessarily we have to study something online specific time or specific location, but we can take some of the exams that can improve our English level. Yes, so one of those exams, sorry, English level, but also teaching level. Yes, one of those exams can be Delta or TKT, or CELTA. Yes, in that case, with all of these exams, teacher can get certified and have their level proved not only inside Guatemala, but also in other places in the world. Yes, again, I was saying that my idea is not to say, okay, well, now that you have certificates, start teaching online in Korea. No, definitely it's not my idea. My idea is that once you get the certificate, you can use it for your own benefit in the place where you are. Yes. Also, additionally, start developing your career. Yes, when you can actually show your employers your certification that it's not only valid for local environment, but it's also valid in the international scene, and that you are actually a person who wants to learn this more and more in this case. Okay. Also, well, basically today we're going to move on to the next location. Yes, well, location, like the next block of information. So I'm going to close this one. Okay, and today we're going to be talking about planning. I put it as a TEFL planning basis. If you don't mind, if you are not in Nearpod yet, you can look at my screen. Let me send you again the link. There are 25 people. Here you go. Okay, so please, you can try to join these links of the first one, Nearpod, or second one with the code. So you will be able to see these screens. Yes. and participate in the questionnaires and everything. And if not, you can continue watching my screen. So for now, I wanted to show you from my screen, if it's possible, if you can see me in Google Meet. These were the questions that I asked you when you signed up for the webinar. And these were the questions. Yes, for example, do you write your plans based on Guatemalan CNB format? We had 34 people, or 60% yes, and 22 people or 40% no. Okay, that's interesting fact. Yes, if you're writing on CNB format or no, I included this information in the webinar to discuss what happens if we have to plan based on Guatemalan CNB, or what happens if we don't have, and what is the difference. Yes, and do we have any advantages? Yes, in this case, one or another way of planning. Could you define the difference between competence and objective in your own words? So here we had yes or partially yes, and very few people said no. I also included this information not only for competence objective, but also for learning outcomes. So hopefully, once we read the information, discuss the information, you will have better understanding of what is what, and if you actually have to use one or another, or what happens if you use one or another. Yes. Here I ask you to name some of the planning frameworks. So a lot of people mentioned similar ones. Yes, the ECRIF, PDP, PPU. Some of them OGSM. Well, somebody, if you are here, the person who responded this one, right? That would be great if you could share with us in the end. Yes. I will mention the most common one, and I will show you that it's not only framework, yes, that matters, but also the format. So it's a combination of two things. And here I asked you some questions about greatest problem in planning process. So for example, a lot of times I heard this, I saw this answer, right? The time, yes. Or for example, organizing something like activities, then again, evaluation, yes, competences or reaching the competences, the low English level of my students, creating life situation, organizing my ideas, different grades, different students, again, time management, yes, innovation, activities according to the plan, yes, or according to the level of the students, taxonomy levels, organizing ideas. Well, as you can imagine, I cannot address all of these questions. The idea of this webinar is to give you a general background, yes, on planning. Okay, so hopefully we can discuss main blocks of the information, yes, and once we finish, maybe we can have a moment for discussion, yes, if it's possible. So if we pass over 1 hour, that would be for discussion, I think. All right, so let's start again. Whoever is new right now in the conversation, welcome. I can see 25 people. I am sending you again the link for Nearpod. If you have seen it on the email, great. If you haven't, Nearpod is an interactive presentation tool. What is going to happen is that you are going to see things in your screen. Yes, not necessarily my screen. Once you're Nearpod, you don't have to look at my screen. Because we will be participating in some questionnaires, and you will be able to observe the documents and the web pages that I included, even a video that are in Nearpod presentation, but you will be seeing them on your screen. Okay, so again, sorry for sending links so many times, but the new people cannot see it until they are in chat right now. Okay, so that was the discussion of the previous webinars. Yes, what we have been talking about. Like I said, we discussed Common European Framework. We discussed the English proficiency exams for adults. Yes, why, how much money, etc. Yes, how to interpret the scores. We discussed different options for teachers who want to get international certification. And right now, if you are on my Nearpod screen, yes, I am asking you to answer the question, how would you describe your current position? So that's a part of the webinar versus, yes, here. You can't get into the page. There are two options, Kelly. One option is you try the first link, it should take you straight to Nearpod like this, right into my lesson. Yes, if it's not working, yes, if this first link is not working, you can try the second link. It's www.join.nearpod.com. It will also take you to Nearpod, yes, but it will ask you, oh, this one is not working. No, it's better the first one. Let's see if I can send you another option. Yeah, it should be the first link. If it's asking you to download an application, probably that's because if you're using tablet or cell phone. Another option is you just search for this page. So if you're on your cell phone but you don't want to download it, you go to your browser, to Safari or to Google Chrome, you type nearpod.com and you go to student login. Yes. So once you're in student login, you can put this class code. The first one works, yes. Yeah, probably the second one is not working, yes. So this is the link that is working. And in case, if you're searching for Nearpod separately, you can use this class code. All right. So right now you're answering the question, yes, how would you describe your current position? If you are a teacher or coordinator in a public school or university or establishment, I don't know how to call it properly, right? Maybe it's not school or university. You're a teacher or coordinator in private school. You are a teacher coordinator in language school. So like it's not divided by first grade, second grade, third grade, but it's like an academy or language school. Yes, I have my own teaching tutoring program. I'm an education consultant. I'm not teaching just yet, or if definitely nothing fits, yes, I can see some other answers. Yes, other. Well, I'm not sure how to answer because I am like teacher coordinator of private. I'm also my own, have my own. I'm also education consultant. So I guess I'm other. Okay. Now I can also show you the results. Yes, these are your responses so far. So as you can see, we have 30% of private language schools, 17% of private school or university, teacher or coordinator. We have some people with other, I'm not teaching, fine. An education consultant, and some other options. Okay, so as far as I can see, we have very different backgrounds. Yes, so since we have different backgrounds, I invite you to think, yes, during this webinar and after this webinar, how the information that you see today can serve for you in your specific position, because it's not the same for coordinators. Yes, it's not the same for teachers. It's not the same for future teachers or people who work like they have their own business, for example. Yes, in that case, again, you have different situations related to planning. Excellent. So now, these were the answers that I showed in one of the webinars, and it was important, I think, to identify what components of knowledge are mandatory for ESL, EFL teacher. Choose as many as you consider necessary. Yes, and in this case, we have several options that include accent, slang, grammar, teaching receptive producting skills, yes. And obviously, writing clear plans for each class, curriculum design, and creating your own materials. These three elements are connected, yes. However, curriculum design is slightly more complicated. It is something that people don't just do simply because they're teachers, and technically they don't have to. Yes, because curriculum design is something way more general and complicated. And if you have ever noticed There is a profession like that, curriculum designer. You can study for that in university, yes. However, teachers are responsible for writing clear plans for each class and connecting them to the curriculum and creating sometimes the didactic materials or finding appropriate didactic materials, right, in this case. Let's see. Let me send you, you download it. Okay, whoever is still not in Nearpod, I'm again sending you the link. Try to use this link or just try to enter a Nearpod through your browser. If they ask you for the class code, this is the class code. If not, you can continue watching from my screen, right? So next, this is what I would like to share with you today. Yes, so in the following 40 minutes, I hope to discuss the topic of competencies or objectives, of planning formats versus planning frameworks. We're going to have an overview of the frameworks and their purposes, and those are the most common ones, yes, the ones that you mentioned in your answers for the Google Forms. So it's PPU, PPP, or ESA, which are actually one and the same thing, but just with different letters. PDP, ECRIF, TEFL framework. This is something I'm adding to this webinar just to show you that what other things you can find out there in international training. Yes, once you are taking webinars or courses on international level, what other things you can see, and share with you some general recommendations, yes, I can think of for planning. So these are the answers again that I showed you at the beginning. If you haven't seen them, here they are again. Yes, how many people plan based on Guatemalan format, Currículum Nacional Base, CNB, and if we can define competence objective. And I know that defining that or writing that is a very big deal. Yes, that sometimes you have to take separate courses just to write the competencies in this case, right? However, let's see, if you're in Nearpod with me, this is your question right now. Oh, my Nearpod is stuck here. Okay. So the question is, how do you plan right now? How should we plan each of our lessons? By competence, by learning objective, or by learning outcomes? This is just your opinion. There's no correct answer. This is a poll, yes? So you personally, you as a teacher or coordinator or future teacher or consultant, what do you feel about it? Yes, if you're Nearpod, you can collaborate. If you're not in Nearpod, this is how the question looks like. I will show you the answers in a moment. Yes, how should we plan each of our lessons? And it says by competence, by learning objective, or by learning outcome. Okay, I will resend you the link to Nearpod if you still want to get connected. Also, while you are answering, I wanted to ask you for a huge favor. If anybody knows this person, Cindy Chach, and this was her email, cindychach80@hotmail.com. That email, I got it back. Unfortunately, this is not an active email. Also, I had here a problem with this one because the person wrote Gamil, but I was able to fix it. However, this one of Cindy, I don't know how to fix it because it's not a typo mistake, at least here, not in part of Hotmail. So if somebody has any idea of who this person is, would you be so kind and just pass her the information that I was not able to send her an email? That's my only problem. Okay, so let's see what you have responded. Let me share that with you. Yes. So this is what you can see right now of how we are answering. Yes, so 53.6% sent by learning objective. 14% said by learning outcomes. Some of you said by competence, yes, and some people didn't have a chance to respond just yet. So this is not relevant. Let's not pay attention to the gray part, yes? So again, if you're answering from your experience, from your internal teacher feeling or something, but the idea right now is to discuss these differences, yes? When you hear these words, what do we mean? First of all, I wanted to start with the history a little bit, yes, and this is the information of where does CNB come from. It comes from a project, it's called Tuning Educational Structures in Europe. This project was designed in Spain originally by Universidad de Deusto, and as you can see, it's quite old if you consider that we're in 2020 and that project was designed in 2003, was published. And that's when the European countries and European universities decided to do an investigation of how to redesign their own educational system and how to, well, basically plan and execute, yes, the programs better. And they came up with the definition of competencies, okay? So the competencies, if you can see in this screen, yes, it says, the report from Tuning Educational Structures in Europe proposes that by learning outcomes, now this is funny, we have learning outcomes and competencies. Now let's see. By learning outcomes, we mean the set of competencies that include knowledge, understanding, and skills that the student is expected to master, understand, and demonstrate after completing a short or learning process. Oh, wow. Is it any better to understand what competencies is? Let's see. The idea of this project was to prepare people for professional life. Yes, what they said back then, they were like, okay, so our students graduate and when they go to work, they don't know how to work or they don't know how to execute all their responsibilities in workplace, right? So they said, okay, let's redesign our educational system the way we get people ready for work environment. That's how competencies were born. So once you write your planning by competence, yes, you should think about something that your students will be able to do, or like they say, knowledge, understanding, and skills. Yes, so knowledge and understanding is more like mental process, and skills it's probably something you can demonstrate. Yes, in behaving or in acting and manipulating something. Yes, and they were designed for professional life. So students, like we use the verb. Yes, so asks and answer questions about personal life. Yes, or ask and answer questions about his house, her house, or something like that. However, if you have ever investigated, yes, about competencies, there's a big problem with that. The problem is that that format, and again, I'm going to say it's format, it was taken from European countries back in 2003, yes, and after several years, it appeared here in Guatemala, yes. It was copied and pasted, changed a little bit, yes, but basically transferred to Guatemalan reality. And here now, teachers here, no, we don't plan by objectives, we plan by competences. So you have to write the competences. Do we understand where the competences come from? Can we actually write the competences in the way that it connects to future professional environment? Do you as teachers think that our students will need English for professional purposes only? Yes. So that's usually the part of the critics that goes for planning by competencies. Yes, we are supposed to create people only for work environment. Those people should be good for work environment. Yes. However, do we think about other component of personality? Do we think about personal development? Those people will be able to go to different countries, learn about different culture, not necessarily for their job, just for fun, just for pleasure, just for developing. What if they go volunteer? Yes, if they go volunteer and they, I don't know, help children or something. Not necessarily this is professional environment, yes? So again, somehow competence is limited, yes. However, it's mandatory in many places in Guatemala. So there's no way to plan without competences. My personal opinion is that we should not include a competence per lesson because that doesn't make sense. If you ever decide to download this document for tuning educational structures in Europe, and if you ever read the document, it's very large, but you can find blocks of this document. You will see that when we design a course or when we design a curriculum, yes, or we design pensum for a career, we have to think about general competencies and specific competencies, yes? But we don't divide them in so many different um, phrases that we write for each lesson. Competencies should go by unit, by block of topics, yes, or by week. That would be the probably the smallest amount of time that we can try to develop competence within, because competence is something that your students will be able to do for life. But it's very hard to imagine that you can reach your competence in one class of 40 minutes, of one class of 1 hour. Yes. So I understand that many times it's impossible to argue with your coordinators, principals, with system of education and say, hey, why am I supposed to write a competence for each lesson? And you will have to do it. However, when you write in somewhere, like when I asked you about your problems and you say it's hard to reach the competence, it's hard to reach a competence within one class. Definitely, yes, because it's a process and that process should take time. Okay. So if you plan by competence, then you have to have it by block. So imagine if you study a block of present simple tense plus vocabulary of personal information, everyday activities, how to describe nature, how to describe people. All of that, yes, includes the information that you can transform into competence. And you can imagine what you want your students in real life when they travel, when they talk to foreigners, when they watch videos, when they create videos, now that anybody can be a video star, yes, or when they go to work, what can you imagine your students doing, yes, after completing the process of studying present simple? Now, what about this one? Is writing and achieving competence mandatory? That's what I was saying. Yes. So here we can think about two things: a competency and outcome. So again, if you go back to tuning, it said here, by learning outcomes, we mean the set of competencies. And if, for example, you look at this one, we say that competency is a general statement that describes a desired knowledge, skill, and behaviors of a student graduating from a program. Yes, it goes wider, or completing a course, or completing a block or a unit. Yes. Competencies commonly define the applied skills and knowledge that enable people to successfully perform in professional, educational, or other life context. So if you are teaching younger children, I don't think you can write competencies for professional life. Yes, you can write for educational, so in the classroom with the classmates. Yes, in the interaction between teacher and student. Yes, in creating presentations. That would be educational context of your competencies, or other life contexts. So, for example, if I teach English at medical faculty, and my students are not right now studying medical English, then I will write my competences based on life context. What can I imagine my students doing with that language? Yes, presenting, answering questions, collaborating, requesting information, writing formal emails, all of that information, yes, becomes my competence for the course. Now we have outcome, a very specific statement that describes exactly what a student will be able to do in some measurable way. Now, outcome and objective are closer to each other. Yes, there may be more than one measurable outcome defined for a given competency. Think again, present simple. Here's present simple with all of the things I can include in present simple. That is my competency. The person can confidently use statements of present tense, change, ask questions, yes, etc. But I will have specific learning outcomes by week, by class, by activity if you want, yes, depending. So what do we say here? A key distinction. A true learning outcome is written so that can be measured or assessed. It focuses on what the student is able to do at the end of the program or some activity. Thus, learning outcomes are the basis for assessment program that focuses on what a student can or should be able to do, either upon completion of course or upon graduation from the program. Learning outcomes are connected to the assessments. Now, competence, again, it is based on all of the observation of the learning outcomes, all of the assessments, and it's a little bit wider. Yes? And finally, what about objectives? Surprisingly, I will tell you that from my experience, when I started teaching in Guatemala, and one of the first trainings that I received in the school, where I was teaching older grades, like seventh grades and so on, it was about competencies. So they said, we are not planning by objectives. Okay, fine, I learned fast. We don't plan by objectives. Excellent, no objectives. Then I went to training of Richmond. It was like one of the diplomado. And we learned how to write SMART objective, which is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Yes. And here we have definition, a statement in specific and measurable terms that describes what the learner will know or be able to do as a result of instruction. Now that is way more specific. Yes. So for example, an example that I got on this training was, okay, here you come, 1st of January, and you write in your diary, I want to lose weight. That's your objective. Is that a SMART objective? Is that objective specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound? So far, no. So far, you say, I want to lose weight. Now, specific, yes, and measurable. How much weight do you want to lose? Yes. So this year, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. Question, is this achievable? Well, depends, yes. If you have some extra weight, that's one situation. But if you are really skinny and once you start doing exercise, your muscles start growing, that's not achievable. You cannot lose 10 pounds. Yes, that would be not normal. So you have to reconsider. Yes, same as realistic and time bound. Okay, I will lose 10 pounds by doing exercise twice a week and not eating after 6 p.m. in 6 months. Yeah? Well, now we're being smart. We're writing specific objective that includes specific measurable terms, yes, and result of the instruction. So I have to do something like not eating after 6 p.m., yes, or doing exercise to reach that objective. So if you write an objective, you will say, students will be able to ask and answer 5 questions about personal information in a student mingle activity during 10 minutes. Yeah, that would be way more specific. So now you can use the objectives to plan specific activities of your classroom. So you want your students in the end to mingle and to ask and answer questions. How would you reach that specific objective. You go to the planning format, you take the specific planning framework once you decide which specific framework is good for you, and you start planning because you already have an objective. Yes, that objective will lead you to learning outcomes, which will be reflected in your assessment. And those learning outcomes, a combination of 2, 3, 5, I don't know how many, yes, will take you to seeing, to observing how your students are reaching the competency. Now, that's not so easy to do because we all of us, well, somehow we work well within some kind of limits. Yes, if you work for a specific school and your planning format is not like that, you cannot come tomorrow and say, hey, I'm not going to plan like you said, because I watched the webinar, and in the webinar they explained me objective learning outcome competency. Yes, I understand this part, but if you have a choice, yes, if you can give your opinion, and if you can design something in your head, maybe on paper it's going to be different, but in your head it will guide your students, yes, like that, you will be able to plan better. So we start by these things. Yes, we start by objective of the lessons. If we're planning the lesson, we think about learning outcomes if we're planning the whole year, and we also take into account competencies. If that's what we are asked to do, we take them into account for specific blocks of planning. Yes, for units, for year, for semester, and so on. All right, and then once we define this information, we can pass to, I think we're going to skip this question for a moment. All right, I will go back to this question. We can go to the next block. We can choose planning format and use a planning framework. Now, this web page, you can open this web page in here. I think I can do that too. Yes, you click on it, and you will see the famous formulario. I want you to pay attention to the word formulario. That means that this table is a format of planning. So it tells you how many columns, how many sections, what kind of information you should put, what goes on the left, what goes on the right. However, yes, it doesn't include what we call a framework. You can use CNV format to plan using PDP, to plan using PPU, to plan using ECRIF, or to plan using any other framework that you can think of, okay? Because this is just the format. After we finish looking at the frameworks, I will also show you the format of TESOL planning, and you will look at it and say, what do you see? Yes, what do you see if you compare this format and the other format? And if you compare what is a format and what is a framework. Yes, so if you're familiar with this one, and many people who study in PEM, yes, since it's Profesorado en Ciencia Media, and technically you're studying for the level of public schools, yes, teaching English in public schools, so you probably have planned in this format. However, once you got inside of content, procedures, and resources, you probably here started writing letters of PPU, PDP, ECRIF, or something, yes? Now, that's because those are the frameworks. And we're gonna start with the framework of PDP. Now, my question is, do you think, well, think about it. Yes, it's a rhetorical question right now. Should I only choose one framework always for my classes or no? Okay, depending on your school, again, yes, that may not be a question in discussion. They may not even ask you, do you want to plan like this or you want to plan like that? This. Luckily, one time when I worked in bilingual school and we were teaching different subjects, we convinced the coordinator that different subjects have different frameworks, and she agreed with us. She said, fine, that's perfect. So if you are teaching reading, literature, or composition, yes, that would be different. Or if you're teaching math, then what kind of planning format you should use. So if you click on that link of that thing, or I'm going to show it for you from here, it takes us to the PDP framework, which explains that this lesson framework helps teachers plan and deliver effective listening, video, and reading lessons. In other words, receptive skills. Yes, we take the receptive skills, we take information from reading, listening, or videos. And the recommended framework is PDP. Why? Because it defines the stages, yes, of what you can do to get your students to better prepare for that listening, do this listening, and apply it to something else. Yes? So here we have some ideas, right? We have the pre-stage, during stage, and post-stage. However, these stages can be divided in pre-1, pre-2, during 1, during 2, during 3, post. Post most likely is only one. However, what if you're teaching reading for the whole week? So in your class, you have 4 reading periods and you read one story for 4 periods, but it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You can extend PDP into 4 days. That is possible. Not necessarily this PDP has to function within 40 minutes of your class. It may even be impossible unless you're teaching like true beginners or very low levels and your audio video reading is like really tiny. Yes. If not, you may extend it and you may think of how to do it pre and during 1, during 2, during 3, and how this post can be converted into some kind of project where students demonstrate their learning outcomes, or even you can see if they can perform, yes, on the level of competencies. So again, if you are teaching receptive skills, or if we see, yes, if we're saying this easier, listening video or video lessons, it's recommended for you to use a PDP framework. After we finish the webinar, and I will send you this information to your email. Okay? Now, next, if this is a short video, yes, and if you can think of it logically, that means that if you are using a PDP format for receptive skills, then we also have productive skills. And the productive skills can be very different. They can be speaking, writing, or if you are teaching clear lessons, sometimes you can use this framework also for math classes, history classes, yes, science classes, because this framework has different structure for the activity. So I will click on this. If you are watching the video on your screen, I will click on it and you will be able to see it on the screen. It's a pretty short video. And if you cannot see it on Nearpod, yes, you can see it from my screen. It doesn't have any voice, it only has the music. So if you cannot hear the sound from my screen, that's okay, because otherwise I'm going to be doubling. So just watch this video, short video, and we will continue with this framework, all right? There you go. Weird. Okay, I hope you finished. That was only like 1 minute and something, yes? So, this framework has different names. If you can see here in the video, it's called PPP, which is, yes, presentation. Uh, oh, we have more people in the webinar. It's also called PPU, which makes the last letter U because it's use, yes, instead of production. And also, if you have ever seen, let me type it in here for you, this framework is also called ESA. I have also discovered it recently, yes, so that means engage, study, and activate, which stands for the same idea. Yes, we start with something that introduces, yes, the language. Okay, if I move it in here, for example, sorry, okay, presenting new language, yes, and it starts with present the information, then students practice the language, and finally they apply it to something practical in their life. Yes, so usually this use has to be personalized. So you have to talk about yourself, you have to talk about your things, you have to talk about your family and things like that. Yes, like I said, this can be applied, for example, to clear subjects, because imagine if this is an algebra class. So I start with engaging, like giving you a curious question or asking you, have you done this in your life or something? Yes. I explain to you the concept in algebra, then you practice something together with me as a teacher, and then finally I give you a chance to do it on your own. Yes, so that's what this framework allows us to do. Now it's different from PDP, because in PDP we have during, where we have reading or listening, yes, or watching the videos, that so we can absorb the information. Yes, so the main part of the lesson is that. However, for PPU or PPP, the main part of lesson is actually practice. Yes, doing something with the language or the information. That's the second framework. Now, um, some new people, if you're still connected, so can you please click on this one, this link, and we're gonna take a look at ICRIF. So again, another planning framework is ICRIF. We start with encounter, we go to clarify stage, we may separate or do together, remember and internalize, and we can finally focus on fluently use. However, in my personal opinion, eGriff is very similar to PPP or PPU, only that it extends the stages. So whatever is the first P is now encounter and clarify. And then whatever is the second P is remember and internalize. And the last letter, if it's the last P or the U or whatever you prefer, actually it says use. Yes. So if you plan on eCRIF, it doesn't really matter if, how do you say that? Or your school said we plan by eCRIF, and if you plan by different format, you're wrong. No, you're not wrong. I mean, your school, okay, great, you can use eCRIF. However, not for all of the activities. If you're teaching reading or listening, you'd better consider the PDP format, right? Because eCRIF again works more for introducing new language and using new language, or for the subjects such as science, algebra, yes, and so on. So, just to remind you, we have seen so far competencies, learning outcomes, objectives. Uh, we said that we start from those to try to build up the road to reach them. Then we take a format, which is a piece of paper, yes, or a document that we have to fill out. And inside of this document, we place framework. And that framework will have to help me to reach my objectives, learning outcomes, yes? Because that framework will guide me through the activities and will help me to work on receptive skills or productive skills. Yeah. If I have a mixture of receptive and productive skills, I have to be creative. Probably ECRIF will work, yes, for that. Or you can create an eclectic format, yes, where you can justify why you're using different stages, and you create, yes, something that will work for you, for your students, and for your specific activity. And again, what we mentioned before is that one framework not necessarily has to function within one class, within 40 minutes of the class. It is possible that this framework can function for several classes or even for the full week, maybe even more. Yes, depending on how you design your activities and what you're trying you're like to put your students to do. If it's drama, by the end of 2 weeks, imagine your students have to get dressed up, they have to learn, they have to act out or something. That's not, yeah, that's fluent use, but they may take you 2 classes just to present that drama. Yeah. So how can you put fluent use inside of 40 minutes? Depending on the situation, you can do it or you may not be able to do it. Okay. So in this document, I'm showing you, it is actually called lesson plan template. And like I mentioned before, I wanted to show you something that I had to work with when I was taking TESOL course online. And as you can see, this is a hybrid of a lesson format and a lesson framework. Why? It's a format because it has line columns and it has extra information like business materials, yes, like level of the students. And then here in when it says instruct and model, you have to click on or check if it's reading, writing, listening, or speaking, for example. However, it is also a framework. But you see, there's no competency anywhere. So on the international level, since the international teaching programs don't work with Guatemala and CNB, or they have no connection with competencies whatsoever, with tuning project, with anything related to competencies, most likely they will be asking you to work on lesson objectives, because remember, objectives are way more specific. Yes, and your objectives is something that they recommend you to communicate to your students. When you start your lesson, you say, today's topic, and you will be able to do, or I want you to finish by the end of the week, something like that. Yes, and by the end of this class, it's going to be a smaller part of this project. Okay, and then it has the framework, but this framework has different letters. There are no letters, it's actually the name of the stage. So we call it instruct and model. The next stage is called guided practice. The next stage is called independent practice. And the next stage is called assessment. So is this similar to PDP, PPU, or something? Or ECRIF? I don't know. You should judge that, right? It's closer to the ECRIF and PPU idea. However, this format, when I had to take the course and I had to plan, this specific format was used for all of the skills, because I could specify on each stage if I was focusing on reading, writing, listening, speaking, or 2 or 3 skills at the same time. So there is no one specific framework that you have to use all the time. Yes, you can juggle in between different frameworks. Format, like I said, is just the like this part, yes, the general part of this. And the rest of the information, yes, depends on you. For example, I put for you here an example of a teacher's guide, and this is a teacher's guide of one of the books of Richmond. It's called Personal Best. It's the book for the adults. Yes. So if you look at this format and teacher guide, I'm sure you have seen that before. This is the student page on the left. Yes. And this is the teacher guide on the right. In this case, you have language skills, and then something that is very similar to the objective, yes? But it doesn't say objective, it doesn't say learning outcome, it doesn't say competency, yes? It is here for you to understand what is the purpose, yes, of this page. And then you can see that this specific teacher's guide has warm-up and activities according to the page, which means that modern books and the books that are based on years and years of research, of editorials such as Richmond, Oxford, Cambridge, Pearson, they already include a lot of planning elements. And even the framework is already in the book. You just have to decipher which part, since this is reading, maybe the first 4 activities or 3 activities will be in the PDP framework. It doesn't say here pre, during, post, but it says here before you read the text, answer the questions, right? And then once you start the grammar part, which starts in here, yes, we can see that the text was part of the presentation, or the text was a part of the encounter. So it's a mixture, a puzzle, yes, that includes several frameworks, but you as a teacher, sit down, open the teacher's guide, think about what you want to reach, think what activities will work for you, and plan on your own format. Yes? So we have a lot of information right now as teachers. We have access to tons of information. Luckily, when we buy the books for our students, we have teacher's guides, and teacher guides already have a bunch of things, photocopyable activities, yes, and things like that. But we have to internally analyze everything and see, is it possible according to my level of the students? Is it possible according to the time that I have? And do I need them to do all of that? Because maybe I can only focus on certain parts of it, right? So to finish, I passed a little bit through 4 p.m. I apologize. But just to finish for you, I'm showing you the general recommendations so we can leave maybe 5 minutes for questions. And I put here 2 columns. As you can see on the left column, there are recommendations. On the right column are something like the elements of the plan in general. Whenever you start planning or you already plan, you normally include these things in your plan. Day and date, yes. Lesson name, if you have a lesson name in your book, or you can give your lesson a name, yes. You usually include level of the class, topic, skills, etc. You include a list of everything you may need, and that's very important for you as a teacher to have it ready for the class, because if you write things but 2 days later you go to class and oh my god, I forgot to bring something, that's not helping yes, for your planning skills development. Okay, you usually explain, if you use the course book, which pages you will work and why. And of course, you will have some kind of goal, aim, objective, learning outcome, yes, that you should include in your lesson. So, recommendation number 1, ideally, you have to write a plan in a way anyone could read it and teach your class for you. Especially if you are a coordinator, you would understand what I'm talking about. Yes, once one of your teachers is sick and you have to come and cover for that person, and you open the plan and there's nothing in the plan, or it's very limited, you have to improvise, or you have to put your students to work in the book, which is not the idea. Yes, the idea is to write a plan in a way that anyone could cover that lesson for you, if that's the situation. Yes, if you are working in a place where people can come and cover for you. Think about the target language, the target skill, and your learning outcome. All of them, yes, outcome, objective, competence. Target language, we say grammar, vocabulary, what I want my students to capture, yes. And the target skill, what I want them to do. Think about engaging students in your class and using the language in personal way. Remember that the last stage of all of the frameworks is some kind of use of the language. So the more personal it is, the better, because people like themselves. They like to talk about themselves. They like to discuss things that they can see. Once we start discussing things that are very different for them, I remember that back in my days in Russia, that's a big joke because we say all I remember from English is that London is the capital of Great Britain, because that's what we used to study. I would have to memorize the text, and the text was about London. Tell me, well, I can tell you personally, like I've never been there, and well, maybe I will go, but it's not one of my like top places on the list. So why did I have to learn all of this information about London, right? Well, we have to consider that. Don't forget that learning happens through emotions. A plan is a flexible path, please. This is one of the most important things that I'm trying to convey, is that plan is good, but it's not rigid. It's not something you have to finish from here to here. Yes. If you come to class and you feel your students are yes, tired, um, they're not feeling well because the previous teacher said something to them. Yes, they have the next class and they have a quiz and you can see them urgently doing something else in class. Think about it and try to do something that will provoke emotions. Okay, you can do only part of your plan, yes, but your students will come out of your class with different perspective on the things, right? Form is not more important than the content and real situation. Again, sometimes we write plans, we fill out all of the papers that they ask us to fill out, especially in schools. You know that in schools it's like huge part, yes, the paperwork. However, that's not more important than the content. Yes, like what your target language and what you want to learn, and what is the real situation of with your students, with your class, how much time you have. If you for some activities you have to replan and something. Yes, okay, form, great. You put it something on paper, it didn't work, great. Just rethink of it, eliminate something, redesign, move on. And you need to train to predict in just time. My huge recommendation from my teaching and training experience. If you don't have a lot of experience with teaching, you have to write the time for your activities. And you have to check that time and see if your prediction was correct or not. If it was correct, good. You write it down, you put the check on something. Next time when you next year or next group you teach something else, you already know approximately how much time you should take. If it didn't work, you see what you can do during this lesson, but you mark for yourself, okay, think about it. Was it because the material was not distributed? Was it because of the instructions? What is it because my students were too engaged? Was it because the internet went off? Yes, and you can predict and adjust the time. So that was a lot of information. For all of you who got connected and who also send me an email, I will definitely send you this information a little bit more structured, like in documents, and the links where you can investigate a little bit more. So this is the page. If you are nearby, you can ask me a question, or if you would like to turn on your microphone and ask me something, I would gladly answer before we get um, finished with this webinar. And if you feel better by typing the question, you can go ahead and type the question and I will be checking. So let's take some minutes for that. Remember, some of you mentioned specific problems for planning. Do you think there is a specific question I can answer? Or you can go ahead and turn on your microphone and ask something? Oh, Sorry. Here's Nearpod. Okay, let's see. Could we have a list of all types of lesson plans? Yes, I will include that. That was the question. Yes, I will include it in the email. Absolutely. I will send you resources as I promised. Yes, so no worries. You can have that information. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, I'm glad. Wilson, you were in time. Yes. Very good information. I'm glad. Thank you very much. I understand that thing with Nearpod was slightly new for some of you, and I also recommend you to investigate that tool. And if it's possible, you can use it in some. I mentioned. Let's see. I mentioned about not writing comments for every lesson. Am I right? Only learning outcomes. Yes, but because if you analyze the definition of the competence, yes, if in the purpose of the competence, it's almost impossible to have it for every single class because you are contradicting the whole idea of having general competences for life or for professional developments, specific competences that go, let's say, if you're talking about university, yes, and people study specific subjects and those are specific competences for their profession, and then those competences I divide in competences of every single class, it looks like kaleidoscope. Do you know what is kaleidoscope? It's like a toy where you like move the glass and everything, yes, revolves. So somehow it's kind of very complicated if you write it for your lesson. What I said is, if that's what your school format, program, or wherever you work asks from you, I guess that's what you have to do. But don't worry about not reaching competence in every single class because technically that's not possible, right? Okay, let's see. What was the other question? Yes, well, I guess, Rocio, that is your question. Yes, my teacher says the competence has to be, like I'm saying, in Guatemalan CNB, en el formato, yes, in the format and formulario, it's included because that's what Guatemala decided to do in system of education based on the proposal of student project. I'm sorry. Now, once you study a little bit more, yes, and you try to compare those terms, yes, and you try to think of them, competencies should be written for a bigger block of information because they are um, something, or like they are activities or like some mental processes that students should have in their brain by the end of a block, and they can demonstrate them but in outside of the classroom content. Yes, so that's where we can think of it. Okay. Which different plans of planning are used in Russia? Oh, that's a good question. I have no idea. I've never worked as a teacher in Russia. I have seen in the university where I studied before, and last year in December, I met my teacher who gave me classes in the university. And well, she showed me that they have to make their own books, which is kind of double complicated. Imagine you have to make your own book for the next course. And but because they were teaching specific English, she was teaching in chemistry faculty. So her English book that she designed was designed for students that learn chemistry. So they had vocabulary of chemistry, they had also grammar like comparative, superlatives, like the verb to be and everything, but it was more focused on professional area. As for the planning format in schools, I have no idea. I apologize. Okay. Oh, I gave you many ideas and reminded about specific content I forgot, so I can include it for my lesson again. Excellent. So if that was something that was inspiring for you, I'm glad. Again, I understand that's a lot of information that may sometimes contradict some information that you may be getting. That's okay. None of the answers is 100% perfect. Yes, we as teachers, we have right to investigate, to find better options, to create something new and eclectic, and we actually should do that as teachers. Yes, and once you study combination of neuroscience, pedagogy, didactics, ESL teaching, you will see that it's a big, big, huge topic. Yes, that, and it doesn't have one perfect answer of how to plan, how to teach, how to involve students in your lesson. Yes, we can have all of this information, but once we are in a specific classroom, we will have to adjust to the specific classroom or specific place, right? Okay, well then, thank you. We passed by 20 minutes. So thank you very much. I will be contacting you through the email. And if you ever have any further questions, you can also contact me back. I will be glad to help you with any kind of information. Yes, like anything you want to consult with me, go ahead and do that. So thank you very much. I will hopefully see you again in some kind of environment, maybe in the next training online or maybe next training in person. Yes, that would be great. All right, you're very welcome.